Usually when we think about massive, multi-million dollar campus construction projects.
Right, the really big ones.
Yeah, there is this expectation of absolute rigidity. Like, it operates like a giant machine.
Oh, for sure.
You get the blueprints, you secure the funding, and then the architects just finalize every single square inch on paper. And then a project manager basically points at the ground and says, build it exactly like this.
Yeah, and honestly, it is a highly engineered process for a good reason. I mean, when you're dealing with millions of dollars in these strict institutional timelines, we naturally crave that certainty.
Right. Nobody wants surprises when millions of dollars are on the line.
Exactly. We want these massive plans to be fully mapped out and basically frozen in place before a single hammer is ever swung.
Blueprint or no blueprint, the idea is that it's clean. You just follow the lines on the paper and boom, the building appears.
That's the dream anyway.
Right. But when you step into the real world of human-centered design, especially over a multi-year timeline, those pristine blueprints often just get tossed right out the window.
They really do.
So today, welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a design and execution process that completely shatters that rigidity. It's this incredible case study about a multi-year, multi-phase project between Legends Custom Lockers and the University of New Hampshire, or UNH.
And it reveals a process that is, well, it's deeply relational, incredibly fluid, and honestly built almost entirely on the fly.
It sounds chaotic.
It sounds chaotic, but it's the absolute definition of building the airplane while you're flying it, except doing it deliberately in the most strategic way possible.
Which is what we're going to unpack for you today.
Because this case study, it goes so far beyond just woodworking or athletic gear.
Yeah.
It's really a masterclass in long-term project management, human-centered design, and this invisible web of cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, our goal today is to unpack exactly how physical spaces are built around actual human behavior, rather than, forcing human behavior to fit a predetermined physical space.
Right, adapting the room to the person, not the other way around.
Exactly. So let's start right at the seed of this UNH project because it actively defies that whole blueprint first myth we just talked about. This massive campus-wide renovation, it did not start with a master architectural drawing.
Not at all.
It literally started with a single conversation. When Legends Custom Lockers first connected with UNH, nobody was talking about a grand vision for overhauling multiple athletic spaces across the whole campus. It was just one isolated project.
Which is very typical for how large institutions actually operate in the real world.
Yeah.
We tend to view universities as these monolithic entities that just, cut a single $50 million check to renovate everything at once.
Right, like it's all one big master plan.
But the reality is it's a constant juggling act of shifting priorities. Budgets change from year to year. Funding comes in phases.
Yeah, sometimes tied to specific donor gifts, right? Or maybe how well a specific team performed that season.
Exactly. You simply cannot blueprint a rigid 5-year master plan when the financial and logistical ground underneath you is constantly moving.
So instead of demanding a finalized master plan up front, Legends just started with the one room in front of them. And that approach, it cascades.
It really does.
It sounds like when you hire someone to remodel a tiny half bathroom in your house.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because that contractor actually listens to you, doesn't force expensive ideas on you, and actually respects your daily routine while they work. You end up trusting them to redesign the kitchen.
And then the living room.
And eventually the entire house over the next 3 years. They go from being just a vendor you hired for a quick job to essentially a strategic partner.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. It perfectly illustrates the core mechanism of trust. In professional project management, moving from a transactional vendor, someone who just takes an order and builds a box, moving from that to a strategic partner requires massive flexibility. Rigid, blueprint-first thinking falls apart the second a budget gets slashed or a schedule gets delayed by a month.
Because you're stuck. If you're just the blueprint executor, you have absolutely nothing else to offer when the blueprint burns.
Precisely. If your entire value to a client is executing a predetermined schematic, the moment that schematic changes, your relationship breaks down. But if your foundation is the relationship itself, you can pivot.
So what did that pivot look like for Legends?
Well, the guiding philosophy at Legends Custom Lockers during this initial phase was incredibly straightforward. Prioritize getting to know how the people actually work, and then figure out how to make the physical space support that work.
Okay, but taking that philosophy, figuring out how people work, and turning it into physical reality is where this gets wildly complicated.
Absolutely.
Because an athletic department at a massive university like UNH, it is not one single culture. It is a collection of entirely distinct microcultures, all operating under the same roof.
Completely different worlds.
Yeah, so you have a solid relationship, you have the green light to build, but now you actually have to design the physical objects. And the way different teams use space couldn't be more polarized.
The physical constraints and their daily routines dictate everything. I mean, you cannot put a gymnast and a downhill skier in the exact same locker and expect them both to thrive.
No, of course not. Let's actually look at the mechanics of that, because the divergence between these sports is fascinating.
It really is.
Think about the ski team. You are dealing with gear that is incredibly long, heavy, awkward to carry, and most importantly, soaking wet at the end of every single practice.
Yes, the moisture issue is massive.
Right. If you just build them a standard wooden box, the wood will rot, the gear won't fit, and the locker room will smell terrible.
So for a ski team, the engineering of the locker has to prioritize ventilation. You might need graded flooring for water drainage, heavy-duty structural support for the weight of the boots, and those 200-centimeter skis.
Yeah, that gear is heavy.
And you have to use materials that resist moisture damage over a decade of use.
And then you pivot to gymnastics, which is the complete opposite. They aren't hauling massive wet equipment.
No, totally different gear.
They are dealing with chalk, grips, athletic tape, and highly personalized, smaller items. A giant ventilated cavern of a locker is totally useless to them.
Exactly. They need micro-compartments. They need highly organized drawers where chalk dust isn't going to cross-contaminate their clean clothes.
And the psychological approach to the space changes based on the sport, too. The physical gear is one thing, but how the athletes interact with the room is entirely different.
Right. Take baseball players, for instance. They often treat their lockers as personal shrines. They spend a lot of time in the locker room before and after games. It's almost a sanctuary.
So they want it to feel private.
Yes. So their design preferences lean toward heavy, beautiful wooden doors, private enclosed spaces, and a visually quiet, pristine room when everything is shut.
Which is a stark contrast to a sport like soccer. Soccer teams are often doing these really quick turnarounds. They are in and out, moving from the practice pitch to the film room to the weight room.
They don't want to be messing with heavy doors every 5 minutes.
No, they prefer open storage, open cubbies, so they can just toss their cleats, grab their gear, and keep moving. The locker room is essentially a transit hub, not a sanctuary.
But this creates a massive design problem.
Right, because if you're the university funding all this, you want the athletic department to look cohesive. You want it to look like UNH.
You want that brand consistency.
Yeah. But if you give soccer these open, airy cubbies, and you give baseball these heavy, imposing oak doors, and gymnastics gets these tiny apothecary drawers, how do you prevent the multi-million-dollar athletic facility from looking like a mismatched yard sale?
It's the classic tension in institutional architecture. You have hyper-tailoring on one side versus brand consistency on the other.
So how do they solve it?
The only way to solve it is by strictly adhering to the principle that form follows function. When you sit down to design these spaces, you do not start by picking a wood stain or a sleek door handle from a catalog.
Right.
Every single conversation has to start with one specific question. How does this team use the room?
You figure out the behavior first, and then the aesthetic is layered on top of it.
Exactly. If you prioritize the daily, lived reality of the athletes, the architecture naturally shifts to serve them. To maintain that cohesive institutional brand, you don't force them all to use the exact same locker shape.
So what's the unifying factor?
You unify the spaces through consistent material quality. You use specific school color palettes, uniform lighting design, and identical branding elements like logos or nameplates.
Oh, I see.
The skeleton of the locker changes to fit the skier or the soccer player, but the skin of the locker remains distinctly UNH.
So you end up with a space that feels intimately tailored to the specific athletes who live in it every day, but it still looks great on the university brochure.
Which is really the holy grail of human-centered design.
Okay, so we've solved the design problem on paper. We have these beautifully tailored, highly specific designs for every microculture. But here is the massive roadblock.
There's always a roadblock.
Always. Custom woodwork is incredibly unforgiving. How do you take a perfectly measured, rigid wooden locker and force it into a cinder block room that is being built simultaneously by 50 other people without the whole thing turning into a total disaster?
This is where we uncover the invisible web of cross-functional collaboration. The logistics of large-scale custom installation are just staggering, and they are often entirely overlooked until something goes wrong.
It's so easy to picture, like, a delivery truck just backing up to the gym, dropping off a bunch of wooden boxes, and suddenly you have a locker room.
If only it were that easy.
Right. But custom millwork does not exist in a vacuum. Before a single locker ever arrives on site, you are dealing with an entire ecosystem of competing trades.
You have architects constantly revising spatial layouts.
You have construction crews throwing up drywall and pouring concrete floors.
You have electricians running heavy conduit for the lighting in the outlets.
And none of those trades are operating with the precision of custom cabinetry. Construction is typically a game of inches, but custom millwork is a game of millimeters.
That's the crux of it. Let's actually talk about the mechanical stakes here, because they are huge.
Yeah, break that down for us.
Think about a 30-foot wall where you're supposed to install a continuous run of flush, custom-built lockers. A drywall crew comes in, and they build that wall just a half-inch out of square. Or maybe the concrete floor has a slight dip in the middle.
Which happens all the time in construction.
Exactly. To the drywaller, or the concrete pourer, a half-inch variance is perfectly acceptable work. It's within standard tolerance. But to the team installing a perfectly rigid 30-foot wooden structure,
That half-inch is a nightmare.
it means the lockers will not fit. There will be massive gaps, the doors won't close properly, and the entire premium aesthetic is basically ruined.
This requires an intense level of proactive communication. It sounds like trying to build a ship inside a bottle, while 3 other people are actively trying to reshape the glass from the outside.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Let me give you another example. If the electrical team decides to move an outlet 3 inches to the left because, there was a stud in the way,
Makes sense for them.
right, easy fix for the electrician. But if that outlet was supposed to perfectly align with a pre-cut hole in the back of the custom locker, suddenly the locker can't sit flush against the wall.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It sticks out into the aisle, which might violate fire codes or ADA compliance.
It's a total domino effect. If one trade makes a minor adjustment to solve their own problem, it creates a catastrophe for the next trade in line. And everyone involved in this ecosystem has a completely different, deeply stressful priority.
That is the core friction of any construction project. The general contractor, the GC, they are losing sleep over the timeline. They just need trades in and out so they don't face financial penalties for delays.
Well, the head coach doesn't care at all about the drywall variance or the timeline penalties. They only care about team morale and having the space ready for recruiting visits.
And then you have the facilities manager who is auditing the plans entirely based on long-term maintenance. They're asking, can we easily clean under these lockers? Can we access the HVAC units above them?
So you can build the most beautiful, functional locker in the world at your manufacturing facility. But if you cannot seamlessly integrate that specific puzzle piece with the electrician's timeline, the GC schedule, and the coach's expectations, the project is a failure.
Which is exactly why the transition from vendor to partner is so vital. A standard vendor just drops the boxes at the loading dock and says, good luck, you deal with the crooked wall.
Not my problem.
Right. But a strategic partner, like Legends Custom Lockers, is communicating with the GC months in advance. They are verifying the floor levels, checking the electrical conduit placement, and adapting their product on the fly when the site conditions inevitably change.
And managing that massive web of conflicting priorities and changing site conditions takes a tremendous amount of time. Which brings us to the timeline of this UNH overhaul. And frankly, this is the most counterintuitive takeaway of this entire process.
It really challenges how we usually think about work.
Because this multi-phase project spanned several years. And the underlying argument from the case study is that the best, most effective projects are not always the fastest.
It's an argument that deeply challenges our modern professional sensibilities.
Wait, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
We live in a world that is utterly obsessed with budget efficiency, speed, and instant results. If I am the athletic director at a university, and I am cutting the checks, taking several years to renovate these spaces sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It sounds like a money pit, right?
Yeah. Why wouldn't they just hire a massive crew, blitz the entire campus over one summer break, and have it all done by the time the students get back? Doesn't a multi-year timeline just mean things are dragging on and bleeding money?
If you view it purely as a transactional construction job, yes, speed is the goal. But if you view it as human-centered design, the time taken isn't a delay, it is an evolution.
What do you mean by evolution?
When you blitz a campus in a single summer, speed actively sacrifices nuance. You are forced to make assumptions. You end up copying and pasting one locker room design into 15 different spaces just to hit a deadline, completely ignoring those microcultures we discussed.
Ah, so you built a gymnastics locker for the ski team because you just didn't have time to ask them what they actually needed.
Exactly. But a multi-year phased rollout allows for discovery. By taking their time and executing phase one, Legends learned how the university operates.
They gathered data, basically.
Yes. So as additional programs joined the schedule in subsequent years, they didn't just repeat what they did the first time. They discovered that while the hockey team desperately needed heavy equipment storage, the volleyball team actually prioritized gathering space.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they realized the volleyball athletes needed the room to function as a lounge for bonding, not just a closet for gear. You completely miss those psychological needs if your only goal is installing doxes as fast as humanly possible.
The slow execution actually allows the project to breathe. It gives the university time to understand what it actually needs as it grows, rather than locking them into a rushed decision they have to live with for 20 years.
And perhaps most importantly, from a business perspective, the extended timeline builds institutional trust.
Which you can't just mandate.
No, trust cannot be accelerated. You cannot buy it, and you cannot put it in a contract. It has to be proven through friction.
It's proven when the flooring guy falls 3 days behind schedule, and instead of throwing a fit, you adjust your delivery trucks to accommodate him.
Exactly. Because Legends proved they were reliable during those chaotic early phases. Because they answered the phone, communicated honestly about supply chain issues, and adapted to those shifting site conditions, the general contractors and the UNH architects felt entirely comfortable bringing them into much more complex, high-stakes phases later on.
Each completed phase basically lowered the temperature for the next one. The friction between the trades was reduced because the relationships were already established.
Everyone knew what to expect.
Right. The contractors knew Legends wouldn't hold up the schedule. The university knew Legends would keep refining the custom details until the coaches were happy. They weren't just building athletic facilities over those years. They were building an operational rhythm.
And that is the ultimate return on investment for slow execution. You aren't just delivering a physical product and walking away. You are embedding yourself as a trusted advisor, capable of guiding an institution through years of inevitable change.
So what does this actually mean for you listening to this right now? Whether you are looking down the barrel of a massive multi-year campus overhaul, or you're just trying to coordinate a new software rollout with 3 different departments at your own company, this case study is a blueprint for navigating complexity.
It really applies to almost any industry.
It does. It is a powerful reminder that any custom project, no matter how big the budget, is ultimately about people. It's about taking the time to have the initial conversation, understanding the hyper-specific needs of different microcultures, and managing that invisible, stressful web of collaborators with actual empathy.
Yeah. And patience.
Yes, patience. Ultimately, it's about ensuring that when a person finally walks into that space or uses that new tool, it feels like it was designed specifically, intimately for them.
It is the difference between forcing someone to adapt to their environment and building an environment that actively adapts to them.
Absolutely. Now, if you happen to be in the middle of planning a campus improvement project, or you are just fascinated by this intersection of woodworking, logistics, and design, you can actually reach out directly to the team that pulled this off.
They're a great resource.
Yeah, you can contact Grace Parker at Legends Custom Lockers. Her direct number is +1 518-775-0051, or you can shoot her an email at grace@legendslockers.com.
Before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to just sort of mull over. We spent all this time today analyzing high-performance athletic facilities, but I want you to look around your own daily workspace right now.
Yeah, look around.
Look at your office, your kitchen layout, or even just the desk where you sit every day. Was that space actually designed around how you specifically use it? Or was it built based on some rigid preconceived idea of how a room is supposed to look?
Like those pristine blueprints we talked about at the very beginning, the ones that look perfectly clean on paper but completely fail the moment you actually have to sit down and do your work.
Exactly. So ask yourself, if you had the opportunity to rebuild your daily environment today, and you started with a simple conversation about your own behavior instead of a rigid blueprint, what is the very first thing you would tear down and change?
That is a brilliant question to take with you today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We always appreciate you carving out time to learn, explore, and question things with us. We'll catch you on the next one.